Elvis Presley's identical twin brother was born dead just 35 minutes before the king of rock and roll entered the world. The Presley family was so poor they buried Jesse Garon in an unmarked grave they could never find again. Elvis spent his entire life feeling like half of him was missing, often talking to his deceased brother in private moments. Number 6. The shadowy twin who shaped music history. In the early morning hours of January 8, 1935, in a tiny two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi, Gladys Presley went into labor. The family was desperately poor, living in a house with no electricity or running water. A local doctor, Dr. William Robert Hunt, came to help with the delivery. What happened next would cast a shadow over music history forever. Jesse Garon Presley was born first, around 4 a.m. But something was terribly wrong. The baby wasn't breathing. Despite efforts to save him, Jesse was still born. Just 35 minutes later, a second baby boy emerged, healthy and crying. This was Elvis Aaron Presley, who would grow up to become one of the most famous entertainers in history. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more symbolic. One twin born into death, the other destined for legendary status. It was as if fate had made a cruel trade, one life for another. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, placed Jesse's tiny body in a shoebox. The family was so poor they couldn't afford a proper burial or headstone. Vernon carried the makeshift coffin to a nearby cemetery where Jesse was buried in an unmarked grave. Years later, when the Presleys had money and fame beyond their wildest dreams, they tried to locate Jesse's grave to give him a proper memorial. But the records were incomplete, the grave unmarked, and the exact location had been lost to time. Elvis's twin brother remained as he had begun, invisible, untraceable, a ghost haunting the edges of a famous life. Some Tupelo locals claimed to know the location, pointing to spots in Priceville Cemetery, but no official record confirmed the exact place where Elvis's twin rests. This uncertainty only added to the mystique and sadness surrounding Jesse's brief existence. Number 5. The twin connection that never died. Even though Jesse never took a breath outside the womb, his existence had a profound impact on Elvis throughout his life. Many who knew Elvis well reported that he often spoke about his twin brother and felt a deep connection to him, despite never having met him. "I've got a twin brother," Elvis would sometimes tell friends. "He's been watching over me from up above all these years." According to multiple accounts from Elvis's inner circle, the king would sometimes have conversations with Jesse in private. His ex-wife, Priscilla Presley, mentioned in her memoir that Elvis would talk about feeling Jesse's presence, especially during difficult times in his life. Elvis's cousin, Billy Smith, recalled, "Elvis felt that when his twin died, the best part of him had died as well. He talked about it with me several times. He had this feeling that he had to live his life for both of them." This sense of carrying his brother's unfulfilled destiny may have contributed to Elvis's legendary drive. Some psychologists who have studied Elvis's life suggest he may have experienced what's known as survivor's guilt, a common feeling among twins when one survives and the other doesn't. Elvis's mother Gladys, who was particularly close to her famous son, often told Elvis that he had the energy of two people inside him. She believed that Jesse's spirit had somehow merged with Elvis's, giving him extraordinary talents and charisma. In quieter moments, Elvis would reportedly address his brother, "Jesse, are you out there?" Are you watching over me?" This habit continued throughout his life, according to those closest to him. His fascination with spiritualism and the afterlife, which developed in his later years, may have been connected to his desire to communicate with his lost twin. Number 4. A mother's grief that never healed. The death of Jesse Garon didn't just affect Elvis. It transformed his mother Gladys in ways that would profoundly shape Elvis's upbringing and psychology. Gladys Presley never fully recovered from losing her firstborn son. The tragedy drove her to become extraordinarily protective of Elvis, her surviving child. Their relationship became famously intense, with Gladys focusing all her maternal love and anxiety on her remaining son. "She was scared to death something would happen to me," Elvis once said in an interview. "She didn't let me out of her sight." This overprotective atmosphere created an unusually close bond between mother and son. Elvis slept in the same bed as his parents until he was well into his school years, a practice that wasn't common at the time but reflected Gladys's fear of losing her second son, too. Psychologists who have studied Elvis's life suggest that Gladys likely experienced what's now recognized as complicated grief after Jesse's death. Without proper support or counseling, which wasn't available to poor families in 1930s Mississippi, her grief became a defining aspect of the Presley household's emotional climate. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, later recalled that Gladys would sometimes call out for Jesse in her sleep, even years after his death. She kept mementos intended for both twins, including baby clothes she had made by hand during her pregnancy, expecting to dress two sons. This profound maternal grief created an environment where Elvis grew up feeling he needed to be exceptional, perhaps to justify his survival when his brother didn't make it. Many biographers point to this dynamic as a key factor in Elvis's relentless drive for success and his lifelong struggle with feelings of inadequacy despite his enormous achievements. Gladys's health declined in the late 1950s as Elvis's fame reached new heights. She died in 1958, devastating Elvis. Some close to the family believed her death was accelerated by the emotional weight she had carried since losing Jesse, a burden of grief she bore for 23 years. Number 3. The psychological impact of being a twinless twin. Elvis Presley belongs to a unique psychological category: twinless twins, or lone twins, people who were born as multiples, but lost their twin before or shortly after birth. Modern psychology has identified specific patterns and challenges these individuals often face, many of which appear in Elvis's life and career. Studies of twinless twins show they commonly experience a persistent sense of incompleteness, a feeling that part of themselves is missing. This sensation can manifest as a lifelong search for connection and completion. Elvis's legendary need for a constant entourage, his difficulty being alone, and his intense relationships with women might all connect to this fundamental sense of absence. Dr. Raymond Brandt, founder of Twinless Twins Support Group International, and himself a twinless twin, has written that many who lose a twin at birth describe feeling half of a whole throughout their lives. Elvis reportedly expressed similar sentiments to friends and family. Another common trait among twinless twins is a heightened sense of uniqueness coupled with imposter syndrome, feeling simultaneously special yet undeserving. Elvis's famous stage persona, combining extraordinary confidence with well-documented private insecurities, echoes this paradoxical pattern. One of Elvis's friends, Larry Geller, who later became his spiritual advisor, claimed that Elvis once told him, "All my life, I've been searching for something. Maybe what I've been searching for is my brother." Many twinless twins report feeling a need to live for two, to accomplish enough for both themselves and their lost twin. Elvis's staggering work ethic, recording over 700 songs and performing thousands of concerts despite his health struggles, might reflect this unconscious drive. Perhaps most revealing is Elvis's lifelong fascination with his own identity. He famously told an interviewer in 1972, "The image is one thing and the human being is another. It's very hard to live up to an image. This split between public and private self, between the man who lived and the brother who didn't, created an existential tension that may have contributed to Elvis's complex relationship with fame." Some researchers have even suggested that Elvis's eventual decline into prescription drug use could partly relate to his unresolved grief about Jessie, a grief he inherited from his mother but never had proper tools to process. Without the language or framework to understand his feelings as a twinless twin, Elvis may have sought relief in other ways. Number 2. How Jessie shaped Elvis's spiritual journey. Despite growing up in the Assembly of God Church, Elvis Presley's spiritual beliefs expanded far beyond traditional Christianity as he got older. His interest in alternative spirituality was remarkably diverse. He studied everything from Eastern philosophies to mysticism, collecting hundreds of books on spiritual topics. This spiritual seeking may have been connected to his status as a twinless twin. Many who knew Elvis noted that his interest in the afterlife seemed motivated by more than general curiosity. According to several accounts, he specifically wanted to know if his brother could see him from the afterlife, and if they would be reunited after death. "I know Jessie is up there looking down on me," Elvis reportedly told his cousin Billy Smith during a late-night conversation at Graceland. "Sometimes I feel like he's guiding me, you know, like he's the angel on my shoulder." Elvis's famous TCB, Taking Care of Business logo, incorporated a lightning bolt, a symbol of divine power in many spiritual traditions. Some close to Elvis claimed he chose this symbol partly as a nod to the divine connection he felt with his deceased twin. By the mid-1970s, Elvis had begun wearing Egyptian Ankh jewelry, an ancient symbol representing eternal life. When asked about it by a reporter, he mentioned it represented his belief in reunion with loved ones who have passed on. In his later years, Elvis became increasingly interested in books about near-death experiences and communications with the deceased. His nightstand at the time of his death reportedly contained several books on these topics, including works that specifically addressed twin connections that transcend death. Perhaps most tellingly, Elvis insisted on keeping his full name, Elvis Aaron Presley, despite discovering in his 30s that his middle name on his birth certificate was actually spelled Aaron, with one. When asked why he preferred the double spelling, he reportedly said it made him feel more complete, as if it represented both him feel a double speed. Some biographers have suggested the additional, symbolically represented the brother he had lost. Larry Geller, who supplied Elvis with many of his spiritual books, recalled that Elvis was particularly moved by texts that describe twins as two bodies sharing one soul. This concept seemed to resonate deeply with Elvis's own feelings about Jessie. During his famous 1968 comeback special, Elvis performed an emotional rendition of "You'll Never Walk Alone," a song about not being alone even in dark times. Those in his inner circle later said he had Jessie in mind during this performance, believing his twin's spirit was with him during this crucial career turning point. Number 1. The twin theory. Did Jessie's death create Elvis? The most profound question about Elvis and Jesse's story is also the most impossible to answer. Would Elvis Presley have become Elvis if his twin had lived? Music historians and psychologists have long debated whether the unique circumstances of Elvis's birth, surviving when his identical twin didn't, may have been a crucial ingredient in creating the singular force of nature that was Elvis Presley. Peter Whitmer, a clinical psychologist who wrote a book called The Inner Elvis, proposed what he called Elvis's twin theory. He suggested that Elvis's extraordinary creative energy and his ability to connect with audiences on an almost spiritual level may have been directly related to his twinless status. According to Whitmer, Elvis spent his life unconsciously channeling his brother's unlived life through his performances. When Elvis moved on stage, when he danced, when he sang with that unmatched intensity, it was as if he was performing for two. Whitmer wrote, "The electricity audiences felt wasn't just coming from one soul. It was the energy of two souls channeled through one body." Supporting this theory is the well-documented intensity of Elvis's stage presence. Many who saw Elvis perform live described feeling something almost supernatural in his performances, an energy that transcended normal entertainment. Could this have been, in some psychological sense, the combined life force of both twins expressed through the surviving brother? Elvis's unprecedented impact on popular culture, the way he seemed to embody something larger than one person, takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. His ability to synthesize black and white musical traditions, to bring together diverse cultural threads, might symbolically represent a bringing together of divided parts, just as he might have unconsciously sought to reunite with his divided twin. Even Elvis's famous name contains a hint of duality. In Norse mythology, from which the name Elvis derives, it refers to all-wise, suggesting completeness and totality, as if one Elvis contained multitudes. Vernon Presley once made a remarkable statement about his famous son. Sometimes it seemed like Elvis was living for two people. This offhand comment takes on deeper meaning considering the twin who never got to live his life. Perhaps most poignantly, Elvis died at just 42. Relatively young, yet almost exactly twice the age of his twin brother's brief existence in the womb, approximately 21 weeks. Some who study twin psychology have noted this as a symbolic completion of the circle, as if Elvis had lived both his brother's allotted time and his own. We can never know who Elvis might have been had Jesse lived. Would the competitive dynamic between identical twins have pushed both brothers to greatness? Would they have formed a musical duo that changed history in different ways? Or would the diffusion of their mother's intense focus and the absence of Elvis's lifelong sense of incompleteness have resulted in two ordinary lives instead of one extraordinary one? The final mystery of Jesse Garon Presley isn't just who he was, it's who Elvis became because Jesse wasn't there. Elvis lived his life in the shadow of an absence, carrying the invisible twin whose existence was defined only by his non-existence. In this profound paradox may lie the true secret of what made Elvis Presley not just a talented singer, but a cultural force, unlike any before or since, a man who seemed somehow more and less than one complete person, forever searching for his other half through music that touched millions. As Elvis himself once said, "When I sing, I put everything I am into it." Maybe that's why people respond. Perhaps what he was putting into his music wasn't just everything he was, but everything his brother never got to be as well.